Don't worry, listeners. No need to adjust your dial. This is Landline Radio. Welcome to the end of the dial at the end of the world. I'm the host, and we bring you stories too chilling and strange to be true, right from the heart of towns where the lines between this world and the next connect. Stories from people just like you. For those long, dark, lonely nights driving down roads that never seem to end. We'll be here. And don't worry if you can't find us. We'll find you. Leyline Radio is from Dreamer Productions and can be found monthly exclusively starting in October on their Patreon feed. Follow the link in the show notes below to hear and enjoy. Welcome back, serial killers, to another deep dive into the files of Saturday Morning Confidential. After the rousing success that was our Halloween episode last year, I knew there was but one pair that I had to bring back to discuss Scream. So for another wonderful ovation, I have brought back Stephen and Steven from Lifetime of Happiness podcast. Guys, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, thank you.
When I was kind of planning out the rest of this year, and I was like, oh, I'm doing 2 months of spookiness. This is my only non-vampire thing this year, that I was just like, I have to get Scream in this year, because to me, now that I've seen it, it is just as important in so many ways as Halloween is to kind of now my love and understanding of horror. And so many people that I love this movie. And we talked about it a little bit last time. So I was like, oh, I got to get them back. So why don't you all reintroduce yourselves for anybody who might have missed our first episode?
Sure. I am Stephen Martin Bennett.
And I'm Steve Bennett Martin.
And we are from A Lifetime of Happiness. And we do our podcast where we share, movies, TV shows, and other bits of pop culture that make us happy, hoping to put a smile on your face along the way. And because we're such horror fans, we usually try to do at least one horror movie a month.
I love that.
Yeah, and I would say that we're very excited to be here because Scream is something that we've not only covered before on the podcast, but one of our, we both share it as a top 5 favorite movie of all time.
Oh, yeah.
So why don't you both just give us a little kind of view into your earliest memory of seeing Scream?
So I went to see it opening weekend.
Okay.
I was in high school. And I had remembered that I had seen a clip for it when Neve Campbell was on the Rosie O'Donnell show promoting it. And they showed the clip where it was the first time she had gotten a call from the killer in her house. And, they have that thing where she doesn't believe it is who it is. And they're like, she goes, well, where are you? I'm on your front porch. And she walks outside and goes, where are you? And the voice says, right here. And then the clip stopped right there. And I remember watching it, and myself and the whole Rosie audience, we all went, and Rosie's like, well, what happens next? And Nev says, I can't tell you that. And it was like, we had been in a slasher drought at that point. In the 90s, because, we had all the great cheesy, sometimes campy, sometimes just wonderful slashers from the 80s. But this was the first one that was coming back. And it was my first glimpse of it. I was like, this is scary. And I'll get into later about my experience with the couple that was sitting in front of me while they were watching it. But they didn't make it out of the Drew Barrymore scene. But I as soon as I saw that clip, I started telling my friends, I was like, we have to go see this. And we used to see horror movies or movies in general on a regular basis. But we were from a small town of 2,000 people. And so new movies were not really a thing in our town. You would get movies that were like a month old. Okay. And so we would have to drive an hour to see a new movie. And it took some convincing to get them to see this, because it's not like we had YouTube where I could pull up the trailer and just show it to them.
Mm-hmm.
It had to be a thing of either word of mouth or they had to see the trailer on their own on TV. So it was a lot more convincing, but everyone agreed it was worth it in the end. What about you, babe? You probably didn't see it when I saw it.
No, I did not, and this will show our age difference. But I was in 4th or 5th grade when I first saw the movie, and I saw it at a sleepover. My friend rented it from Blockbuster, also putting us back very much into the time.
Blockbuster.
I
I miss
Blockbuster.
Blockbuster. Just movie stores in
Oh,
general. I
yes.
miss that kind of culture. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just remember like being at a sleepover, and it was one of the first like horror movies that I watched when I was like old enough to like understand. Like I remember watching Halloween even when I was younger and kind of following along, but like this was just something unlike anything I had ever seen before. And I think that's the experience for a lot of people back then is they didn't make horror movies like this. They didn't make like meta movies like this that are so aware of themselves and calling out genres and tropes, and while also being especially being in 4th grade, like scary as you know it was just like I remember afterwards I was like I need to get it on VHS, and then I got it on what was DVD and then Blu-ray, and
Mhm.
Yeah,
been a huge
I've
fan
owned
of this.
so many copies of this,
Yeah.
VHS, DVD, and Blu-ray. And I think it's interesting. My brother's generation, the horror movie that defined his generation was the first Nightmare on Elm Street, because he's 8 years older than I am.
Mhm.
And then my generation, it was the first Scream.
Both
And
by
I
Wes
love that
Craven.
they're both exactly both Wes Craven.
I love that so much. Yeah, I mean, I've just watched it for the first time, and so it's been interesting to kind of start taking in horror and then see kind of some of these backbone ones to then see this. Because if there's something I love more than anything, it is camp at the end of the day, which is what I'm loving so much about horror. And this is such meta-aware camp that like I wasn't quite aware of that going into this, just because a lot of the people who I know who love this don't necessarily like the camp aspects of things. And
Mhm.
so seeing this, and it took me about 15 minutes to go, like going through that Neve Campbell scene of her answering the phone the first time. And I was like, okay, I'm locked and loaded. I'm here. This is great. Cause it's funny. Gore doesn't really bother me. And I kind of loved that they launched in with the gore in that very first scene with Drew Barrymore giving, and that blonde Bob giving her damnedest with the burning Jiffy Pop. It's it's so, like at no point
like
looking
so many
past it.
references now.
Oh, and the great thing about all of that is we hadn't seen anything like the Drew Barrymore scene in maybe a very long time, if maybe
Mhm.
ever. And that defined the opening kill that would be in horror movies for the next 2 decades.
Oh yeah. I mean, just doing some reading, this re-legitimized the genre of the slasher film, like because it had gone from the like peak movies of the 70s and 80s to the straight to video versions of those, and then their knockoffs and their knockoffs. And also having established actors in all of the roles, plus some really fun cameos like the Linda Blair cameo as one of the but even like he's still pretty much uncredited depending on where you look, but Henry Winkler as the principal, like there's so much to this movie that again was kind of smart because it drew people in even if they weren't necessarily going to see a movie in this genre. They wanted to see the actors that were in it, which is so fun to see them all now 30 years later, what kind of what is happening with their career, and coming off this won't come out for a couple months, but coming off the heels of them starting the newest Scream filming and Neve Campbell walking away.
Yeah.
Which again, that is a different conversation, but also at the same time, can you have Scream without Sidney Prescott? Like, it's one of those moments that this is all just kind of at such an interesting time, I think.
So the rumor that I've been hearing on Twitter was that it was only going to be a minor supporting cameo appearance by her,
Mhm.
but it was going to set up 7.
Ah.
And that
Has 7 already been greenlit?
Yeah, I mean, 7, like they've already been greenlit for the
Mhm.
for this one and the next one. And there's also some rumblings that at this point, I mean, everyone's gonna look silly when it doesn't happen, but everyone's saying that, they did come to terms and they're using it as the biggest meta surprise for everyone when she does show up.
I mean, it would make a time. I mean, this just happened. Like, same world but different world, with Kimchi and Trixie Mattel fighting on Twitter for 2 weeks and like they're famous friends, to then I was like, friends, it's got to be a makeup launch, and everybody's like, no, it's falling apart, and then they literally announced the makeup launch, and I went, that would be honestly, any conflict at this point would be the best bait and switch we could have. Like, so honestly, her showing up or having that ghost face mask ripped off, and it's Sydney, it's just any sort of thing that just to have her pop up would be so lovely. Also, because like I have always loved Neve Campbell because she kind of gets the assignment in so many ways when she shows up. Even when she cameoed in like Reefer Madness at the behest of her brother. Like,
So, funny enough, that's the episode we just launched today on our podcast. Because we're doing August is summer camp. We're doing all camp movies this month.
yes. Okay. Well, everyone, you got to go over and listen to that episode because that is how you make a musical a movie.
Yes.
Like it also improves on the musical. I've seen the musical now twice professionally, and the intermission act 1 ending does not work nearly as well as just continuing through and amping up into act 2, and having that being able to go back and forth between the idea of the black and white film into the color version with that fucking ending was just, it is chef's kiss and should be a feather in HBO's cap in many ways, the same way Gypsy with Bette Midler should be, but is not.
Slight correction, it's Showtime.
Showtime. So, yeah, but I mean,
we
yes,
just watched it. It's the only reason.
Yeah, so you would know. But
they
same.
need to, like this needs to find its own resurgence. The way that if you've never seen another camp horror movie, All About Evil by Peaches Christ.
It is on my it's like one of the next few on my list because Peaches has just like guested on like 5 podcasts I've been listening to, and with my love of horror, and I'm just recording an Elvira episode right now, like to launch right after this one, and so it's all those things that like Peaches fits into that, like what came after Elvira in such a way that it is on that list because I adore Peaches and all of her work.
And Peaches is guesting on our podcast.
That is incredible. I can't wait to hear it. I cannot wait to hear it. Oh, that is amazing.
So you were talking a minute ago about people seeing the movie or actors that were in it. With a small nod, this began the Henry Winkler Renaissance, which led to Arrested Development and things. But people saw this movie for Drew Barrymore because she was pegged as the lead.
And she's in 10 minutes of the movie.
Yeah, but that 10 minutes though still is just
it's so good.
I had a friend at high school who Drew was her favorite actress.
Yeah.
And she went to see it and she made her boyfriend leave. Like I think they didn't even make it halfway through because she was fuming so much and she was like audibly like just pissed, and the people around her were like, just go, I don't want to hear you talk. And so she finally grabbed her boyfriend and said, we're leaving. And like,
that's so funny.
But I mean, her performance, one thing that I loved in like the commentary, I remember on DVD, Wes Craven talked about how he got her in the mood for the scene. Do you remember, babe?
I do, but tell.
Yes. Like the morning of like shooting those scenes where she was like having her breakdown and crying, she went and told him about like this newspaper article she read about a dog being burnt by its owner and how upset that made her. And so during the scene, like right before they could hit record, he kept on saying, Drew, I'm lighting the lighter, just to get, and she would immediately just burst into tears and like start crying.
But she also just has that best, because she naturally has just that very downward pitched sound to her voice with that slight lisp. And she's very playful and fun. You cannot accuse Drew Barrymore of not being fun. Like, she is a good time girl. Her talk show is absolutely bonkers, but I just enjoy her so much that in this, also you don't get there's something about this that's so great, is that they understood the quippiness that was coming in contemporary media. So it felt very much like Clueless. It felt very much like Buffy that would come after this, that, it's that quippiness that, teens didn't necessarily have at the time, but we were getting used to them speaking like in film. And it made it so, I guess, it was those palate cleansers. This movie's so good at getting you so stressed out and then really wiping that palate clean. So you're just like, oh, we're having so much fun. And then the next time they scare the shit out of you, it is even more stressful. The one thing, and I know that it was also on purpose, you just like, I see Skeet Ulrich from the beginning, and he's so JD, and Heather's he's so just that Patrick Bateman, just the dangerous handsome brunette guy that I was just like, he's probably going to be the killer from those first moments. But I was like, I'm kind of not mad at it because I just can't wait to see him unravel. And oh boy, I think kind of launching into the things I love about this is when we get to the end where they're just like, oh, Sydney, you want to know the exposition? You want to know why? You want to know why? The reasoning? And just the unhingedness of Skeet and Matthew Lillard. Like, Matthew, this is also a Matthew Lillard Stan podcast. Like, I love him. He's so good. He is not nearly appreciated enough for things outside of Shaggy that he's done. Right. But I think kind of launching in, those were some of my favorite things of, they start in a way where you can see what's coming because that's what they're trying to do. And they start off giving you these flat characters and then slowly, without you realizing it, are giving them 3 dimensions, and they're giving them depth as the story develops, which is something as just a viewer and a storyteller I really appreciate about this movie.
So whenever you go back and watch it again, I want the scene where they are sitting on the wall at school and they're talking about Casey's death the night before. And they're talking about how they were all interviewed by the police. And they ask you if you like hunting because it takes a real man. And then where Matthew Lillard says, no, I didn't kill her. And you'll watch, Skeet gives him a look that is very pointed. Like, you would almost think his eyebrows were going to be raised, but he's staring daggers at Matthew Lillard. And he goes, nobody said you did, buddy. Where the undertone is, dumbass, shut up.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until watching it back that you're like, oh my God, they gave us that clue right there. But unless you're looking for it, it's just going to look like he's kind of brooding. But
yeah, I mean, they were setting him up the entire time, coming between like him sneaking in her window and then that scene. I know that like it was only after she accused him and he got, she got the call from, it wasn't from jail. We know it was Matthew Lillard's character like doing it.
Right.
But after that, I was like, oh, it's probably not him. And then when they had sex, like at the time, like you couldn't have sex in a horror movie,
right,
survive. And so I was like, well, he's definitely not it. So like they were, doing everything along the way to convince you, while he's the obvious suspect, that he's also not the guy, because it broke every trope that existed really up until
and they killed him on screen right in front of us.
Yeah.
I mean, it was all right there.
But yeah, that spiral into madness at the end, like you were talking about, being like that is just watching them, like especially like stabbing each other. Like I had never seen anything like that, like so graphic. That wasn't like that was that aware of what they were doing. And Stu on the phone and he's saying like,
my mom and dad are gonna be so mad at me.
Yeah, it just was so funny and wild and scary, like all at once.
And I love the whole line of, don't blame the movie, Sid. Movies don't make murderers they make them more creative.
Yes.
And I love that whole thing, because in all the movies, it's about the movies. Like, so you haven't seen any of the others, right?
I haven't, but they've all been put on a hard drive so that I can watch all of them, because I need to see all of them now.
Because the motivation in the TV show is all like the movies become part of the motivation in every single one of them.
Yeah.
Well, and in the third one, they're making a movie about the story of the first movie, correct?
Yes. They're on Stab 3 at that point.
Return to
Woodsboro. Yeah.
I love that. Now, what's interesting is I went to grad school in Gainesville, and this movie is inspired, I will say, which on my other true crime podcast, we have covered Gainesville Ripper because it did inspire Scream, the unauthorized musical at Rockland stage in LA. And so it was interesting because I was expecting more kind of connections with Gainesville, and there is nothing about Westboro that is even common to because what's funny, I spent the whole time going, well, why is everybody's house so alienated? And I was like, oh, it's literal commentary. Like it is all part of the joke. Like, and that's, I think it was one of those that I literally sat there and was like, just stop thinking about it and enjoy the film. The whole point is for you to not think about this. Like,
growing up in the mountains of West Virginia, seeing how far Stu's house was from everybody else, I was like, I get that.
yeah.
That's how far my house was from everybody else. Now living here in Sarasota, I'm like, oh, you mean that I can throw something at my neighbor's house?
Oh, well, in like Gainesville, where all of the students lived, you're literally like apartments in old buildings that are all connected to each other. So that's why with that one, it's crazy that no one knew that he was doing elaborate murder things. But this, again, from the beginning, I always really enjoy and now that we know, in that moment that we know that there are two of them, it then makes sense because there is that direct switch every time that you stop playing along, and it's like, okay, when did this go from one boy to the other? Like how, there's all those moments of I'm actually enjoying the cat and mouse aspect of the killer playing with the victim. And also that idea of the story of Sydney's mom there too, and also Gail Weathers is is that her last name, Weathers?
And she's my favorite character in the entire franchise.
Also, because everybody never talks about Courtney Cox being their favorite Friends actor, because Monica is massively, pretty much unlikable for a lot of people. But like with this, and then see, I don't mind her. I mean, I don't love Friends as much as I, did when it was originally on, just because of time. But like when I see her in things like this and see her in other projects, like I just rewatched Masters of the Universe for another thing, and I was just like, she is always really fun to watch on screen because you kind of know exactly what you're going to get. But like the scenes with her running behind Dewey in the red Scoochie dress, in the trench coat that is just as short, and the red heels, is just everything. And her I didn't forget the safety this time, asshole, was just like,
yeah.
You applaud so much of it. I mean, and even Jamie Kennedy in his role is just so great. Like it's and Rose McGowan and the real, I mean, I understand now. I understand why I have so many friends who are terrified of automatic garage doors.
Yes. That got me. And that was one death going into it where, like, while I understand that it happens, like that's the one I look back on and I'm like sad about. Like, I wish she could come back as the best friend for the sequel.
Well, and except that her best friend ends too is one of my favorite Scream characters. Like, she's just so good.
Yes.
I honestly thought, well, Rose is too big of a character in the movie to die. So when it happened, I was shocked. I was like, oh, she's going to get away. And I was like, oh, she didn't get away.
And and one thing that I thought was interesting with like future watches that I noticed as you were trying to figure out like which of the killers it was killing at the time was that the way that they shot it were led to assume, and like it logically, that it was Billy that killed her. And I would think like that it would have been Stu being the one that killed her, being the boyfriend.
Well, but I think that's they did the crisscross murder switch because
you think that he did the first kill.
Well, even when it goes to Nev Sidney at the end, whenever Stu stabs Billy, that we think, and Billy dies, quote unquote, on the bed, and then Stu's chasing Sidney, he was supposed to catch her at that point. She wasn't supposed to get away. And so Billy had killed Tatum in the garage. Stu was supposed to kill Sidney in the bedroom. Crisscross, we switch. I kill yours, you kill mine. And I love that when you go back and watch it, you see that Stu sent her off to her death saying, go get me a beer. Like saying, Billy's going to be waiting for you.
Mhm.
I need you to go die now.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody cared that she was missing for over a half an hour of real time to them.
Yeah. And everybody keeps commenting on it, but nobody bothers going to look for her because also, like, go around the side of the house, go into that room because everyone knows exactly where she went to, but no one bothers to look for her.
Yeah.
I mean, well, because you also, I think they intentionally set it up too so you think it's Dewey sometimes as well, just because.
Boots.
And
Well,
so,
the boots in the way that like he like was almost like creepy with the way he was like, we're gonna walk down with Gail.
Yeah.
mhm,
And you almost are wondering, like, is he just playing dumb
mhm.
or is he really
Or
that
like did he
naive?
finally snap from people not taking him seriously?
Well, because then that's the thing. I went, oh God, is it actually Dewey? Because I was like, she's been a piece of shit to him the whole time. And I get sibling relationships, but that's crazy. I would, even mad at her, I would never speak to my sibling that way.
The black boot red herring through the movie is one of my
Mhm.
favorites because you see in the bathroom scene where the killer steps off the toilet and then the
Slowly drops the
cloak
robe.
goes down.
Oh, so good.
And then you also see the sheriff has the same boots.
Mhm.
You see Dewey has the same boots. And so then you, in your mind, because at that point it's a 3-beat, which is what usually takes for someone to pay attention in a movie.
Mhm.
And then you start looking for other black boots in the movie.
Yep. Yeah. It's so I'm going to hand it over to you guys. What are some of your things about this movie that just make it so rewatchable, so revisitable, and why it's one of your favorites?
Well, I would say that it's probably just how like self-aware and meta it is in the way that they approach horror while keeping it scary. The first time, like, you'll never forget like how terrified you were the first time, even when you rewatch a movie. And this one is one that you can still find yourself holding your breath in anticipation dozens of times into watching it. But then just being that we love horror so much and how self-aware it is while also being respectful of it, and the number of Easter eggs that you get, like in the beginning when they mention going to the Mackenzies as a nod to Halloween, and then later on when they have the janitor Fred wearing the red and green sweater.
And
For Freddie, that was Wes Craven.
Yep. And that was Wes Craven who was there, but like who was the janitor.
Yeah.
But yeah, the number of nods that they do both like out loud as well as silently is just makes it so much fun when you rewatch it trying to find them all.
And I love a lot of the lines. Like the one that stuck with my friends and I in college was whenever Stu's just being too graphic and Billy's like, it's called tact, you fuck rag. And that's still just one of my favorite lines because one of our friends, he doesn't know what subtlety is. And so I'm always like, Ronnie, it's called tact, you fuck rag. And but there are all of those like really quotable things, and with the nod to old horror, like whenever Randy comes in and he's like, Stu's gone mad, he's gone crazy, and Billy goes, we all go a little mad sometimes, and then he attacks him, and and he goes, Anthony Perkins, Psycho, and it's just one of the great things about Scream is that while it's moving the genre forward, it never forgets where it came from.
Exactly.
That's
also one of my favorites was oh, you pussy whipped mama's boy. And when Sydney's on the phone with him, and I was like, oh yes, because I mean there's also that great moment which is so foretelling, because recently there was, I think it was one of the girls that killed their friend because of Slender Man. Like they were a vessel for Slender Man. And her response was crying and saying, my mom and dad are going to be so mad at me. And it's like, girl, this is so much bigger than this. This is an international case now. The world's going to be mad at you. Yes,
your friend. Yeah.
I hope your parents are disappointed and mad at you. God, I hope they are.
it's beautiful with comments like that, like how it also brings you back to remember that they are still kids. Like they're doing fucked up things and murdering each other, yet they still have that mentality of high schoolers in the way that they approach it, where that's your thought when you're about to, go to jail for murder, is my mom and dad are going to be so mad at me.
And because in his mind, whenever we were going to get away with it, it was fine.
Yeah.
But now that we're about to get caught, oh no, it's the consequences of my actions.
Yeah. What 17-year-old hasn't said that at least a dozen times?
Absolutely. Well, and what's so interesting that Matthew Lillard does, because there's nothing subtle about his performance in this, while there is a ton of subtlety to it. The look on his face when Billy is saying that Sydney's mom was sleeping with his dad and that's why his mom abandoned them, and it was the first time. And it's the response, and it's that, I think it's that moment where his character realizes that, oh fuck, I'm in danger too, a little. Like he's
I thought I was along for the ride, but I'm not in control here. But I also love now that the queer community uses that whole scene where they're like leaning on each other and like right at his ear, and they're like, oh yeah, they were a couple.
There was some serious hate fucking going on there, whether it was meant to be gay or meant to be controlling, because they clearly weren't getting it from the girlfriends, so they were getting it from each other. But it's also, I've always seen that picture and I went, this just feels so dangerously homoerotic in a the worst and best kinds of way. And then watching it, it's so confirmed because of the way they look at each other the whole movie as well, because they're constantly watching and checking in and checking on each other. Because it is also clear to me that at some point Billy is going to actually kill him, and then Billy is going to be the victim at the end of it, Billy the lone survivor, who then can continue going on being completely deranged. Because it's also all of that fun pseudo psychology of the 90s is like coming out of Satanic Panic, but going into like this pre-mental health awareness time of being like, severe trauma literally leads to deviant behavior. And it's just like, oh god, it's all here. It is literally all here.
And I can't wait for you to be caught up on the series, because there's so many things I want to say right now. You were talking also, babe, you were talking about how, hold your breath at scenes. There still is a chase scene in the second movie that to this day, 20 some years later, I still am like, and you'll see it, Matty, whenever you get to it, but like, it's still tense knowing how it ends up. Like, Scream is the one that like defined this new genre. And this is blasphemous to a lot of people, and you'll probably get comments. I think Scream 2 is a better overall movie.
I'm always loving any time that because I'm someone that I will always say Sister Act 2 is the better movie of the two, Shrek 2 is the better movie of the two, Gremlins 2 is the better movie of the two. Like, I am always here to stand and talk about how a sequel can learn and should learn from its original, and in many ways should be better than the original. Like, you need to prove why you've requested more money to make this other movie.
And I think that's what we get here. And it takes nothing away from the first one. It builds, and I just believe it's better. You can't ignore the iconic status of the first. 2 is the one that I will if somebody says, which one do you want to rewatch, I will always pick 2.
The 5 though is up there for me now. 5,
the new one. Yeah.
I've heard it's so good. I'm so excited to get there. But just looking at the cast of 2, adding Sarah Michelle Gellar and Jada Pinkett Smith, like, I will do anything for Jada in a movie. So I am there. I can't wait.
So good in 2. Like, Jada, her, like, we when we covered 2 on the podcast, we talked a lot about Jada's performance, and Jada is another undervalued actress. Did you ever see the Batman TV series Gotham?
Oh yeah, as her as Fish is Mooney.
Mooney.
Yeah,
like, she for her to get to chew the scenery there is just so good.
Well, I love her all the way back to Different World when
Oh
she
yeah,
was literally 16 and 17 and like holding her own versus Jasmine Guy on screen. Like,
which is something
so
to
good.
say right there. Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And like, so she's just, it's always funny to me that as the couple, Will has been the more famous actor, but every time Jada is in something, it is a top notch performance. And I will go to a property because she is in it. She's why I watch Gotham. I mean, other than also, I will see anything Batman, even if it looks terrible, because like the Schumacher films are some of my favorite bad movies. So like, it's just one of those things that like, so when they announced that she was in Gotham, I was like, done, I'm there, I have to be there. And
yeah.
she delivers, she absolutely delivers. uh what are some other things for you guys that just kind of stand out as just iconic and wonderful about this movie?
The Gale stuff,
Mm-hmm.
in general is always so good for me. Going from the whole, um, when does your book come out? Soon. Great. I'll send you a copy. Boom.
Punch.
Bitch goes
So
down.
good.
Boom. Sid, Uber bitch. Yeah, like
Mhm.
it's so good. And but you can also see in the before we get there how serious she takes her job, and she's not doing it to be cruel. Whenever they're having a conversation where, you said that I lied all the time, and Gail's like, well, I do think you misconstrued things, and um
Mhm.
well, he left wearing that jacket. No, someone left wearing
Mhm.
that jacket. Like
Mhm.
she may not have been appropriate to go after a high schooler, but she also, I don't think, was overstepping her journalistic bounds at that
Mhm.
point.
Mhm.
And her flirting with Dewey is some A+ stuff.
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
the way it starts off where it's more for business and forgetting the story, but
Uh-huh.
like as it continues on, she gets
Hmm.
softer and it gets
Mhm.
more sincere, and it just builds to that kiss at the end. It
Mhm.
just it, their relationship is another thing I really enjoy, but seeing develop over the course of the
Yeah.
movies.
Yeah.
I also love that they lean into letting David Arquette's character, like having Dewey go, it's my boyishly good looks. And I was like, okay, good. I'm glad we're acknowledging a world where like how is he not handsome to people? Like that's what's shocking to me is when people are treating him like a puppy. And I was like, are we not acting like he's absolutely adorable, everyone? Like I'm confused here. But a design thing that they did, and it's in Liev Schreiber's single moment on screen as the supposed killer of Sydney's mother looking over his shoulder. It dawns on me at the end of the movie, he and Billy have the exact same haircut in the exact same color. So it's one of those things that was like, of course it was someone who you thought was him, but it was your boyfriend
Mm.
with the same hair. And then seeing that Leaf Schreiber is in the second one makes me, I'm honestly, whenever we stop recording, I'm just going to sit down and watch the second one and text you all immediately as soon as I watch it.
Please do.
Please do, because I can't wait to hear your responses to so many
Like
things.
the opening kill.
The opening kill, or Sydney's friend Hallie. Um and I
Funny.
I like I also have a theory of where the second one takes place, because
They never give the college.
so they never
Mhm,
they say it's Windsor College, but they never say where.
mhm,
Um, and Sydney gets a call from a 513 area code number, which is Cincinnati, Ohio. And
mhm,
when she repeats the number back, she just says 555. If it
mhm.
was an out of area call, she would have started with the area code. So it makes me believe that it was a local number, which that Windsor College is in Cincinnati. And I used to live there, so like I'm like, yeah, we get to claim number two.
Well, I mean, the wiki does say Windsor College in Ohio. So, I mean, I don't know anyone can update the wiki, but so I mean, I believe there are killers in Ohio. I mean, we've all been to Ohio. I absolutely would believe.
Oh
I know
yeah,
at least one killer who used to live in Ohio.
they never found the bodies.
Ooh.
And like Gail's journey in this movie was good. Gail's journey in number two
Great.
is so much better. And because I don't think they even realized what they had the
Mm-hmm.
character of Gale in the first one
Mhm.
until it was pretty much done,
Mm-hmm.
because everybody, like, this was definitely Sydney's movie.
Yeah.
The second one, it's definitely, let's talk about the trio,
Yeah.
is the type of thing.
Mhm.
And it's really like, I have so much affection for this movie,
Mhm.
for the writing, for the cinematography, for the
Mhm.
directing, for the choices that they
Mhm.
made, the willingness to push the envelope where we hadn't seen it before. Because back to Drew's opening kill, like, that was bloody
Mhm.
and it was intense. And, watching it back when her mother's on the phone and she can just hear her daughter dying
Mhm.
and then sees her hung from the swing in the tree out front. Like, they tell you right up front, we're not pulling any punches.
Mhm.
And
And
another
then they
great,
don't.
and they don't. And another great artistic choice is, we as an audience over the course of horror movies had gotten used to scary things happen at night in the
Mhm.
dark. If the movie is during the day, you're pretty much safe.
Mhm.
And for us to have Ghostface pop
Mhm.
up in the day, like even the scene where Sid and Tatum are on Tatum's front porch and we see Ghostface in the bushes, you're like,
Yep.
you're not safe at any point in time.
Yep.
So
Mhm.
it makes the audience go, there's not a moment I can let my guard down.
Yep. Also, the musical score pulling inspiration from the iconic horror scores before it. Because, like, when we talk about Halloween, one of the things we talk about is the iconic score. And so, this literally, doing reading, the score itself has its own cult following, is like setting up this really wonderful kind of iconic feel. Because even moments that don't feel like they should be scary, it elevates so much because there is this kind of constant danger, and the audience kind of gets put in that headspace that Sydney is in so much. And so it's so, the score is so good. It just kind of, every step of the way, you can tell care was taken for every choice that was made, which is so important. And then to also have someone who is as prolific as Wes Craven take this at the helm, you can really, the best parody comes from people who understand the genre that they're parodying in a way.
Mhm.
And
uh
Red Right Hand being the unofficial theme song to the whole
yeah,
series.
yeah,
And it becomes a thing that I actually heard it in a non-scream setting, and you have the visceral oh scream
yeah,
whenever you hear it. And I love that song that I had never heard before this movie, and then you hear in
Yeah.
other screams, that now is forever attached to this.
yeah. Now, something that, anytime you read anything about Scream and talking about how they've moved the franchise further and continue to kind of riff and parody on the genre as it's gone, as people who like love horror, are horror aficionados, what are some things that you see movies that are inspired by this that are trying to do that get wrong, that Scream maybe continues to get right or does right in a way that nobody else is kind of seeming to kind of latch into?
So right after this, we had I Know What You Did Last Summer.
Yes.
And the thing that Scream does really well is they make you care about the characters no matter how small they are. By the time Principal Hembry dies, I didn't want him to die,
Yeah.
because we saw him stand up to the bullies for Sid. And we also saw at the beginning the care that he was showing when Sydney had to be interviewed,
Mhm.
and him speaking over the loudspeaker. Like, it's a few scenes, but you care in a minor role. Um, I Know What You Did Last Summer did a very good job of also making you care, because I don't know anybody that didn't want Helen Shivers to survive that chase scene in I Know What You Did Last
Mhm.
Summer. And the it's the care about the characters that this movie gets right, where Rob Zombie's Halloween reboot that
Mhm.
he did got wrong because his characters are unlikable, and I just didn't care. By the time Michael was slaughtering people, I was thinking, fine, they're
Mhm.
awful. Just do it. And this and act every version of Scream gets that right of we're going to make you care about these people so that when someone dies, it actually means something.
Yeah, and even comparing those two movies, like I Know What You Did Last Summer versus Scream, that I feel like Scream continues to do well is, and some movies get it, but not all of them, is just being able to rewatch it and see in advance, like that you know the secret of who the killer is and that it all makes sense, while also having them on screen so much between the two of them. They're in almost like every single scene, one of them is. And then you know, see how it all works out and it makes sense. Like I Know What You Did Last Summer, the difference for that is that once you know who it is, it doesn't matter because it's not someone you knew until he was done.
Right.
But being able to like that you know, not rewatchability also is I think what makes it so much different than so many horror movies, that once you know who the killer is, like it doesn't matter, or that you know who the killer is from the start and it doesn't matter. Like this one you can keep going back to and it seeing another layer.
You're absolutely right with, especially when you're watching and rewatching for like a critical eye, and you're trying to see, you know, did they give this character enough time off screen to have done the kill that they needed to kill? And as you're watching this and any other things, you're like, okay, who, because that's one of our things is we're watching is like, okay, who did that kill? And like sometimes it's easy to figure out who it is, like Stu in the bedroom because Billy was right there in front of them. But in some of the others, like in the Drew Barrymore opening, we believe Billy was on the phone taunting and Stu was the one doing the killing.
Yeah, because I don't see Stu having that suaveness on the phone of that opening scene with like just the ghost face asking like, "What's your favorite scary movie?" Or you know, if you hang up on me one more time,
I'm
I'm
gonna
gonna
gut you like a fish. Yeah, exactly. And you'll see it, like when you watch it again, you're gonna start playing that game too. Is okay, which one was it?
And it all adds up,
And it does every time. Like it all adds up. They didn't cheap out in any way. Um, this was a lot of care was put into this film and it has, as you can see, it stands the test of time. We are over 20 years later, and you're hard pressed to find somebody that will try to tear the movie apart. Like it's universally beloved.
Something that has really kind of stuck with me as I'm like sprinkling in these kind of icons through as I'm kind of, because really once the 2000s started, we had kind of an onslaught of constant horror, gore things, whether they were like mass release, small release. And, you know, every few years we would get, you know, once kind of Saw started, but I remember House of Wax being super iconic at the time, even though you watch it now and it's like, oh shit. Or, you know, Hostel, Human Centipede as we're going through. But a lot of what I'm finding about horror, it's not necessarily rewatchable because the creators don't do a good job of setting up things to, they're very cut and paste. So, you know, you, once something has been divulged, you know, there's not other things hidden that you could have seen along the way. And what I am enjoying about things that are being considered the classics is they are rewatchable, and I find myself wanting to rewatch them, but also they're the ones that have a balance between the horror, like the thrill aspect, and the gore aspect that make horror as a genre. So like the things that are like Saw, I found myself not being bothered by them particularly too much, because you see the like horror porn coming, you see the grotesque thing that's going to happen, and you can kind of move on. Where in these, the gore is a kind of a disgusting payoff because of the chase to the kill. And then it's almost something that you're like, oh no, they're not going to show it. Cause like we even talked about with the original Halloween, we don't see the blood except once. And, you know, it's one of those things that some of those. So in this, they take it that next step further because the ratings that, the censor bureau was a little lighter, that it was one of those moments of, oh God, it's so horrific, but then it's going to get even more horrific to push the audience through it. And it kind of increases that endorphin, increases that addiction to, oh God, I don't want somebody else to die, but how is it going to happen? And so, I get excited when you talk about anything that has a rewatchable thing, because now I'm so excited to go back, find those Easter eggs, find those little things. That's why I see Marvel movies on a Friday or the Thursday of the release, and then I see it again on the Tuesday of the release to catch those, catch those extra things. And it's something now that I've seen this that, with a few exceptions, I don't think a lot of modern horror has captured in the same way. Or you've got the companies like the Blumhouses that are like just pushing out constant horror, that it doesn't always kind of take the finesse and the care. And they also, horror in a lot of ways, I'm seeing they're afraid to make fun of each other and take the piss out of each other, where like the ridiculousness of it is also kind of what leads to the terror. And so leaning into that, I think, is what kind of also makes Scream so special.
And one of the things, like, so when Blumhouse first came out, they were not top notch quality, but it's almost like they had to pay their dues by making some popcorn flicks. And now we're getting like the Halloween trilogy that is, it's good quality horror. And Blumhouse is finally, instead of making movies to make money, they're making movies that they want to make.
And I think they're also doing a really good job of choosing which streaming services it goes to. I mean, not only does that help, I'm sure, them financially with bidding and things like that, but like the Hulu series was like perfect for Hulu, where they had a horror movie around each month.
Oh, yeah, that I loved. Into Darkness.
They know when a movie should just be pushed to Shudder. No offense to Shudder, but like, they know when it's worth doing Netflix without constantly being on Netflix.
Like, and their recent The Black Phone.
Yeah, and they know when to push it out to theaters. Like, they do a good job of being strategic about where they release their content.
Also, how they partner with Jordan Peele, but not every Jordan Peele movie is released with them, but they know when to partner with him because, great things. And, it's one of those things. It's like, this will come out as Horror Nights is happening. We've got a double header Blumhouse house this year. And Black Phone was absolutely terrifying. It was absolutely guttural.
Yeah.
I dreamt the character for weeks after, because it absolutely scared me. And then I went back to watch Freaky, and it's one of those that it's dumb and it's funny, but it is also terrifying.
Oh, and that one was so well done. And as we were watching it, because we didn't see it in the theater, we streamed it. And I was like, this really should have just been called Freaky Friday the 13th. And because, it's Freaky Friday and Friday the
13th.
And it turns out that was the original title of the movie. And and I love that they're able to be like, we're going to do serious horror like The Black Phone, and we're going to do some fun horror like Freaky, which is like, those performances were really good. One of the things I love about Scream is that it comes back at the right time to reintroduce slasher into our genre, because after Scream 3 was done and we went over a decade without a new one, torture porn became the thing of the day between the Final Destination movies, the Saw movies, and the Hostel movies. I don't
consider the Final Destination ones part of that. I mean, I was thinking about it earlier when you were talking about like your love for the lead up to the kill, and how that, like, that's what the Final Destination movies are all about.
Yeah, that's the whole Final Destination. Yeah, absolutely.
And the more successful of the Final Destinations were the ones you cared about the characters. And the same thing with the Saw movies, like the second Saw movie, where you had that whole group of people in the house trying to find their way out. They built with those characters. It wasn't, okay, here's a trap for one person, here's a trap for a second person, where you don't care. The second one was done really well. And then one of the later ones where everyone was like, the whole theme was you should have worked together and you could have all made it. Like
I
that
think
one,
that was 5
I think
because
so too.
Julie Benz from
Yes,
Buffy was in
yeah.
that. Yeah, that was 5. Yeah, it was one of the few ones that I actually went to see in theaters, and I went, "Oh fuck, that's crazy."
And so that one was another one that was done really well. And then from there, we also started into the supernatural
Mhm.
scares between like
The
The
Conjuring
Conjuring, which I
franchises, yeah.
love, but then you also had the paranormal activities,
Mhm.
and you had all of those things where the villain, quote unquote, was going to be a supernatural
Mhm.
thing, and then you know, Scream comes along again with 4, and you're like, "Oh, okay, we're gonna get a
Mhm.
few more slasher things." And but I think that us getting this brand new trilogy of 5, 6, and 7, that it's going to reinvigorate, because it's
Slashers.
been enough time that
Mhm.
it really is a brand new generation. And
Yeah.
you're finding a lot of people that didn't grow up with the first Scream or haven't seen it till recently. Uh,
Listen. We've all got our problems. This was mine. I know. I'm a bad gay. I know.
but now, it's it's here again, and
Mhm.
like I thank Scream for bringing slashers back, because
Mhm.
as horror is my favorite genre, slasher is my favorite subgenre in
Mhm.
horror. I love the mystery about it. Like,
Mhm.
because sometimes, like Halloween, like we know who the killer is, but a slasher where you're not sure. Oh,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that Ghostface can be anybody every time he comes back. Also, there's that juxtaposition of just seeing the Michael Myers mask or the Freddy or the Jason mask or Freddy's appearance is really disarming. But the idea of Ghostface, it's whimsical and cheap and terrible, but like is doing arguably some of the worst body horror and the most calculated evil things. And so with this funny kind of play mask that it's just oh, it's one of the most exhilarating parts of this for me.
Oh yeah. And
Mhm.
you hit that, like it can be anyone at any time, and even the line that they said in the police station, this is a cheap costume that can be bought at any five and dime in the state.
Mhm.
And so it could be anyone, anywhere. And because I believe it's Gail who shows the mask on camera for the first
Mhm.
time,
Everyone knows.
everyone from then on out
Mhm.
knows exactly what the killer should look
Yeah.
like.
And we know if anybody loves anything, it's a copycat. Law and Order had said Law and Order SVU had like 3 different copycats of BTK. So like, it's well, we've also seen it through so many prolific true crime cases from the
Mhm.
60s onward, but everybody loves a copycat. Well, what are some things that if someone hasn't been convinced yet to go as soon as they're done with this, what is just your words of inspiration to have someone pause this right now, go over to Paramount Plus where they can watch all of the Scream franchise?
Until the end of the month.
Until the end. Oh, yeah. So I guess by the time this comes out, that won't be the case, but it will be October when this comes out. So I'm sure it will be somewhere.
It'll
I'm
be
sure
somewhere.
it'll be somewhere. You'll be able to find it.
Yeah.
What is just that inspiration for someone to go kind of invest into this as a new franchise for them?
So Scream is a smart franchise. It doesn't talk down to its audience.
Mhm.
The dialogue isn't dumb. Like, you don't, other than Dewey being naive, you don't assume that any of these people like are ignorant at all. Like, these are people that you would think are normal everyday people. Like, it's a little heightened, but these are people that you can root for. And then you're going to find your favorite lines because it's infinitely quotable. And you're going to want to talk about that Drew Barrymore scene over and over again. And like now you're going to be able to say, what's your favorite scary movie?
Mm-hmm.
Like that is now pop, like that is part of pop culture. Like when you're having a conversation with someone and you want to talk about horror movies, people will say, what's your favorite scary movie?
Mm-hmm.
And some people quote from the second one, Showgirls, absolutely terrifying.
Bless.
Like the movie is just so well done, and you'll thank whoever finally got you to watch it for watching it, because you're gonna love it.
And if you haven't watched it yet, we hope it's us.
Yeah. Oh, it's clearly going to be you two, clearly. Because what I'm hoping is they'll listen to this, they'll go watch the movies, and they'll go listen to your podcast where you recap the movies as well, and just get in as much as they can.
Yeah, and we have done 1 through 4, like Steve said. So
And by October, we'll have done 5, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure we're going to add 5 in for our horror, because we do all horror for the month of October. Just
Brilliant.
You should.
Yes.
And
that's what the month is for.
It's true. Oh, I'm starting in September this year. I'm just saying, fuck it. We're starting with the vampires in September and moving through October, and we're just celebrating spooky time. So,
wait, speaking of vampires, as part of our camp month, we're doing the original Buffy movie.
Oh, I just over on my network, we did in May. We did we did a quick anniversary thing where we did the movie, we did the show, and then we did the kind of extended universe. Just as love, because I fucking love Buffy. So I just
favorite show of all time.
And that movie is honestly not as bad as people say it is. It is not,
and it's just not Buffy.
No,
yeah, exactly.
And no,
because could you imagine if Sarah Michelle, every time a vampire had come around, she had cramps? Like, girl.
Listen, there were a lot of those Donald Sutherland, early Joss Whedon things that I just go, absolutely not. Thank God they did not hit the wall and stick for the show. Thank God.
Yeah, like Paul Rubens' performance, though.
Oh, camp. You want on camp? Yeah. You want the most iconic death always. Sam, who is our guest for that, she literally was like, okay, and again, we are talking about the most iconic death of all time, the longest, most ham bone chewing of the literal scenery. Also, another great David Arquette performance too. Just
yeah, like, what are you doing outside my window? Like, and whenever I saw Paul, like, goodness, it's probably been about 5 or 6 years, I said, I know everyone wants to talk to you about Pee-wee, but can I talk to you about how good your death in Buffy was? And I said, not that I'm discounting Pee-wee, because I grew up at Pee-wee's Playhouse.
Of course. Mm-hmm.
But also somebody that's very down to earth and just lovely.
Oh, I can imagine. I also love that he and Cassandra Peterson are the best of friends. I need them to do a movie together already, and it doesn't have to be Pee-wee and Elvira. I just want a movie of the two of them together.
Exactly. And after Cassandra's book came out, I texted him and I was like, I was kind of trying to subtly say, can I get an introduction to Cassandra? It didn't work, but I was trying to just push it that way. But for Pee-wee, Paul Rubens fans, he's doing a memoir book like Cassandra did. And if you have you read Yours Cruelly?
It just showed up on my doorstep because I am prepping a case for why the Elvira movie is actually genius and wonderful, but I'm also kind of talking about her life and how incredible she is, and she's the true message of perseverance in Hollywood. So it just showed up because I'd ordered it and then it was backward. It was a mess, and that's why I should have just gone to my Barnes and Nobles and bought it and not bought it from Amazon. But yeah, it just showed up today. I'm so excited to get into it.
Elvira is one of my favorite movies of all time, and she is so a sex positive, but she's also never going to be a bully. And you can learn so many good life lessons from Elvira. And wait till you read this book. I mean, my God, it is.
I'm so excited.
It's so good. So I can't wait to hear your Elvira episode. that was one of the ones we did back in the day too, because I introduced Steve to the Elvira movie, and because that was more
Yeah, and that was a fun one to do that I wasn't expecting.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And because it's camp, and I found besides horror, camp might be my second favorite genre.
Of course. I have a camp podcast brewing with a friend of mine because we just all we talk about is camp properties. And I was like, there are no like gay camp podcasts out there that just focus on camp and how important of a genre it is and how it's literally defined and kept gay people going for 70 years plus. So plus camp goes much further back than film, but it's just so. And I love someone that even before everyone knew she was queer, like, talk about an ally.
Oh,
It's Cassandra Peterson. And also like
right.
gay icons. Again, I know the meme goes around every once in a while, but I also want the movie where she and Dolly Parton play sisters.
And
Like so badly.
Sister
So badly.
Witches too, where
Yes.
and it has to be like where Elvira, like, even if I would love for it to be Elvira,
Yeah.
and where Dolly's like the good witch, and they're separated because they went different paths, but they come together because of some thing from their past. They have to, like, a great uncle or something like that they have to come together to like save the world. I think it would be amazing.
And I also would love it if somehow because there has to be a musical scene, but like Dolly's witch does her magic with music or some sort of thing, just because you can't have something in Dolly not sing something. She's played an angel so many times. Let's have her be a witch. It's fine.
And Cassandra can sing too.
Absolutely. She started off in the Vegas Showgirl system. So like, she is a performer. She can sing. She did the Elvira Universal show at Horror Nights or Knott's Berry, or was it Knott's Berry? Knott's Berry.
It was
for
the Knott's Berry.
eons. And I was like, I wished I'd known that, but I also don't think I could have appreciated it when it was running because, but like, it's just one of those things that I think we have so many people who are now discovering her as kind of an icon and a legend. I need her to come back to Drag Race again because it's been since season 4, like
too long.
Well, I also need her to go do Dragula as well,
Yes.
come back to Drag Race bit and do another horror. Like, one, we need another horror acting challenge because that show is scary enough. So like, talk camp bad scripts as Drag Race. But just have her come back. I also thought she would always be an incredible Snatch Game judge because she's so funny. Honestly, I keep saying, because last year we had Miss Piggy on All Stars, which I said Piggy would be the ultimate judge, and she was perfection. And then I was like, you need Paul Rubens and Cassandra Peterson as the guests on Snatch Game, and then as your judges, because what Paul Rubens does is drag. It's just a different kind of drag, but what Paul Rubens does is drag. Pee-wee is drag.
Yeah, any of those type of character theater groups like that, where like, even if you look at SNL, like a lot of them are doing drag. It's just because they're doing the same character, makeup, wig, hair. It's happening. And I could talk about Elvira and Cassandra Peterson forever, though.
Well, think about even, I don't know if you all remember from the Logo days, the Big Gay Sketch Show, when Kate McKinnon, when everybody finally learned who she was.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I've been to New, like her and Johnny McGovern, but the fact that Fitzwilliam has never come back in her life, but is rivals Stewart from Mad TV. Like, it is.
I love Fitzwilliam, especially when Fitzwilliam went to Hogwarts.
I just went to magical vagina, Daddy. It's so just so good. And Erica Ashe as the Chicago style yoga instructor, like Stephen Guarino, Coleman Domingo, like. I wish more people knew about Big Gay Sketch Show because of Kate on SNL now that she's leaving, because she is an iconic star, which she has always been, but it's just those things of like, could it get revived, or could they, like, I don't know, release them? Because I still own them on Apple on iTunes from when I bought them 12 years ago. But
I like whenever they would do the missed connections or man for man as read by
Maya Angelou. Because also, bring it back. Could you imagine someone like Bob the Drag Queen or Monet Exchange being put in that cat? Like,
Yeah, like I immediately thought of Bob for that.
I mean, that's the thing is like, there are all these things that like World of Wonder should go back through that like canon. Because also you had things like Jeffrey and Cole Casserole by Cola Scola, who is just genius. There was just so much on Logo that wasn't terrible, but no one was watching it because it was a Logo. I mean, you even had the Sorted Live series from Del Shores. Like, it's just,
I love the Sorted Live series. I mean, that's
so
where
good.
we got to have Rue McClanahan and the late great Olivia Newton-John.
Oh, I mean, and also Leslie Jordan as an icon. Shooter Wardell, shooter in the head. Just, it's there are all these things that I get. For all the queer things that the straights have appropriated, there are some of the things that I was like, how are y'all still missing this? Y'all love Leslie Jordan. Go out and watch it. Yeah. It's free online. Go watch it. Hulu's got it up. Go watch it, please. It's so good. But thank you both for coming back on the show with me. It has been a gay old time, and it just fills my soul with joy.
We've made difficult decisions.
And there are still more ahead of us.
2 people aren't enough to save the galaxy.
We need the toughest,
smartest,
deadliest allies.
We need you.
We need you to join us.
And listen to Reignite,
a certain point of view podcast about storytelling,
love,
and Mass Effect.
Join us every other Thursday as we fight for the fate of an entire galaxy.
You can find us everywhere you get your podcasts.
Or at certainpov.com/reignite.
We're counting on you.
We should go.
Saturday Morning Confidential is brought to you by Dreamer Productions and is a proud member of the Certain POV Podcast Network. You can find us on Facebook at Saturday Morning Confidential, on Instagram at SMC Pod, and on Twitter at The SMC Podcast. You can find all the shows that Certain POV has to offer at certainpov.com. We're also on Patreon at Dreamer Productions, where your donation of only $2 a month keeps constant programming coming in and supporting our new shows as we go throughout 2022. Now join us again next time for another deep dive into the files of Saturday Morning Confidential.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.